Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus tracks. Congratulations. Josh here. This week we are joined by David Lefkowitz to continue the Masterclass sub-series. So excited to talk to Dave again. This time we discuss his role in Prawn Song Records, particularly around the releases from 1993 to 1995, when Dave and Les Claypool took a stab at running a record label. Remember, you can find us at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address, and there is a Facebook page called Primus Tracks. Please enjoy our continuing conversation with the heaviest of the heavies, David Lefkowitz. Dave Lefkowitz, welcome back to Primus Tracks, by the way.
Great to see you guys again.
Tim Soya's back because, anytime Dave's on, we got to have Tim.
Somebody has to remind me what happened in my life.
You want to go old school? Me and Dave are the oldest school of Primus there is. So.
Pretty much.
You guys are the Horace Mann Elementary School of Primus. It's great.
At least the two that might have some memories of what happened back then.
Yeah, that's true as well.
There's a lot of other cast of thousands that were around us, but they fell off and they don't remember anything ever.
Well, it's great that you two are here to jog one another's memories as we go back a ways here. Today's topics, we'll talk about Prawn Song Records. So mostly those 90s records, Dave, that you were definitely a part of as far as Prawn Song Records goes, will mostly be in about 93 to 95. So if you set your attenuator to those years.
Yeah, you'll have to remind me if we already talked about anything, because I sort of remember us talking about Woodstock 94, but maybe that was sort of part of the pork soda conversation.
Right. As far as Prawn Song Records goes, Les created that name and that label for Suck on This, as we've discussed before, but then returned to that name and that label around, I believe it was 93, to begin releasing albums by some of his Bay Area friends and other artists. So what was your role, Dave, in Prawn Song Records at that time?
Officially, I was the co-owner of the label. Okay. I ran the company. So I think my title was also president, but Les didn't like me having like the highest possible title. So he might have made something up that was bigger than president. I can't remember what it was, commander or something.
Sure, yeah, emperor.
Charlie Hunter was certainly one of the first ideas for a release on the label. Obviously Primus opened for U2 in 92. Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy were first.
Open that show.
Yeah,
right.
We did 18 shows in stadiums. Disposable Heroes was Michael Franti, originally of the Beatniks, and then
Alternative Tentacles.
Yeah, later of Spearhead and his own projects. Quite a success. And Charlie was in that. Matter of fact, I feel like in between Beatniks and Disposable Heroes, Charlie and Michael Franti had a duo, just guitar and voice. I saw them open up for Living Color out the Warfield. So
I'm not aware of that. That's
one of the cassettes that I digitized is sort of a compilation of live performances at the club Nightbreak on Haight Street. I know Soy's never heard of that place.
The Nightbreak, sure.
Gosh,
been drunk there with you many times. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Yeah, Prawn Song. So, but yeah, that duo was really cool. And then years later, when I was co-managing Charlie and I was briefly managing Michael Franti, they were both on a festival bill up at the Calaveras County Fairgrounds, Mountain Air.
Okay.
And I had convinced them to do a collaboration during the set. This was in like 98. They were like, yeah, what should we do? I'm like, remember you guys used to have a guitar and voice duet? And they were like, yeah, that was cool. I'm like, just do that. So they did. That was awesome.
Nice.
But anyway, so, Chris Cuevas, a.k.a. Trows, longtime tour manager for Primus, and later my partner on some management projects, some artists that we've managed together. He was on that tour, obviously, with Primus in '92, and he got to know Charlie as well. And of course, Michael and Charlie and the whole Disposable Heroes band were Bay Area guys, but I don't know how much Les knew them. Obviously, Beaten Eggs had been around. And I guess there was this notion, we had self-released Suck on This.
Right.
And that had allowed for Primus to get better known on a national level and attract attention from bigger record companies that could help the band, go beyond what we could do, on our own. So the idea was that Prawn Song was going to do one-off record deals, mostly with bands made up of our friends, and give them, the same opportunity that we'd had.
Right. Without signing an 8-record deal out of the gate as nobodies.
Yes, and I've
with
said
Warner Brothers or whatever the heck,
Yeah, and I've said it many times, but it's just definitely very, very true that this was a terrible, terrible business plan.
Yeah, you say that in the book as well, and so I wanted to hear more about that. I guess I understand why it's a noble thing to do for your friends, but at the same time, it does sound like a pretty lousy financial idea.
Yeah. Well, the way that record companies typically make money, I mean, obviously every album ever released is its own unique situation on every label, it's its own unique situation. But the way artist development used to work, at least back in the day, was that you spend money getting an artist known through all the channels of marketing that exist at that time. And you might spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to do that. And, sometimes the artist still doesn't sell that many records or get that big until later on. So, that's why labels sign artists for, 6 record deals or whatever they are, that you can make the money back over time. Not to mention the fact that, as I've discussed before, certain types of advances from record companies are recoupable out of the band's royalties.
Right.
I think we've gone over that before, but But yeah, so a one-off, you're just like basically pissing into the wind, It's
maybe it will sell 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, plus these were eclectic releases, to say the least.
Merv, Charlie Hunter.
and I think Les kind of had, obviously very altruistic viewpoint to help out his buddies, but there was kind of that sense. I mean, Primus, by '93, Primus had done extremely well.
Right.
It was a dream come true.
Yeah.
It wasn't from lack of hard work and strategy and good allies and whatever. Yeah, best case scenario, so Liz was like, maybe I can help my buddies, get farther along. So, obviously Todd Huth and Merv, Merv and
Merv.
then eventually Tim, did his release.
Laundry. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Did Laundry come out on Prawn Song?
The first one did, yeah.
The first 2 releases that we put out, does anybody remember the order? Was it Charlie and Merv?
I have Charlie Hunter Trio '93, and then Merv in '94, as well as Porch and Laundry, but I'm foggy on those 3
Porch came out too,
Yeah, Porch. We've talked before about the Prawn Song sampler CD.
I have one still.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And we had that Gavin exploitation party at Bimbo's.
Right.
I wasn't at that. I remember that, but I was not there. I was out of town.
I have promotional T-shirts that have never been worn, multiple, from that show.
Cranky.
I'm a large, by the way.
So it's got the Prawn Song logo on the front on a black shirt, and on the back it's the whole lineup of the show, and it says, Prawn Song Gavin exploitation party.
Nice.
And the coolest thing about it was, so as this was being formulated, Les was wanting to reunite the Pre-Lur and Tim lineup of Primus, who had made that great demo tape called Sausage, which we've discussed, really helped the band locally take several steps forward, with Jay Lane really funking it up, and so that band, was going to be called Sausage as a result of that demo tape. Interscope was happy to put out a Primus side project, basically. I mean, I guess, at this point, even Jay Lane, this was sort of the same altruistic thing, but even like on a bigger level. Because now it's like, let me do a band with Jay and Todd, and allow them to get in the spotlight and go on tour and be on big shows and make some money.
Which was the band that kind of got cut off as Jay and Todd quit. And then Tim and Lur took over. I know that Les really wanted to showcase, dude, here's where we came from, man. Check these dudes out,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, everybody has their own view of all the different eras of the Lur and Tim music. But I mean, I would say that like, Todd Huth was such a driving force of everything pre-Lur that, that as far as what's different about that band, I mean, obviously that's the main thing. Yeah. But then Jay was just such a funk drummer compared to like Curveball, in my opinion, who was kind of.
So did the Sausage thing with Interscope buying into it? Did that set the stage for helping Prawn Song Records with
so
minimalistic interest in all the fiddle faddle Les was putting out on Prawn Song?
I mean, I can't remember if there was anything specific about the Interscope release that helped the other Prawn Song releases, except for the fact that Interscope allowed us to put the Prawn Song logo on the Sausage album.
Oh, right.
So
right.
It was, and those things, you never know. I mean, they call them vanity labels, in the major label world, like vanity plates on your car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but the real world doesn't know, because I mean, there's a whole range of possibilities. If you have a vanity label, you might be spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars and then just getting like a little distribution from the big company or marketing distribution. I mean, it can go the full gamut to basically like, it just has the logo on there and that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was really our situation, but it allowed us to sort of tie things together. I wouldn't be surprised if we had done some print advertising with Sausage that included Merv and Charlie at the time. But just to sort of start talking about the business part of the Prawn Song label, I knew that we were never going to have the resources to, hire our own staff to do marketing and whatnot.
Right.
Obviously, we needed a distributor first and foremost, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I mean, I had figured out a lot about independent labels, including like when we signed to Caroline. I mean, like I knew that was a great company to go with for many specific reasons.
Yep.
The Prawn Song label, I decided to look for a company that wanted to do the marketing and and had distribution that we could get into. Mammoth Records, was based in Carborough, North Carolina, which was basically where I'm from. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. Carborough is kind of an extension of Chapel Hill, where UNC is. Because I was from there, I knew the owner of the label. His name was Jay Ferris. And I didn't know him when I lived there, but a couple years after, I was already in San Francisco working out of David Rubinson's office. I was reading CMJ Report, like I did every week, which is the college radio trade publication. And there was like a half a page ad for this North Carolina band called the Pressure Boys, who when I was in high school were the local ska band.
Oh, wow.
But at this point in like 88 or whatever, maybe it was 87, they kind of morphed a little bit and really reminded me a lot of XTC, who I loved. Kind of like a Southern indie rock meets XTC. And there was a phone number on it. And I thought, I'm like booking these bands in California back in 87, 88 as an agent, for unsigned bands. And I thought, I wonder if the Pressure Boys would need any help booking some shows in California. So I called the number to say, do you guys need that kind of help? And it was the management company that Jay Ferris had at the time. I think it was called Doc Rock Management. I forget who else they had, maybe the Connells. But anyway, Jay and I became friends and we stayed in touch and we hung out at, conferences and stuff like that. And so in 93 or whatever, and I was telling him about this Prawn Song project, he's like, oh, we just started this Mammoth Distributed Labels division. And we got to do this. And it wasn't like I was necessarily pushing the fact, the Les solo project, which was not Sausage and obviously became Holy Mackerel, but at the time was called From the Corn.
Right. And
Yes,
that appears
I
on
remember.
the sampler CD, the Carolina Rig original
Yeah.
version. Yeah.
There seemed to be this notion that I don't remember me pushing the idea, but there was certainly a notion that Mammoth was going to get that record.
But the Mammoth logo has been on a bunch of stuffs of the Prawn Song
Well, so that's what happened was
and post label stuff.
they really pitched me on doing the deal with them, and they had one other label that they were going to distribute, which was an electronic music label from the UK. I was pretty open-minded to different music, but that wasn't necessarily like my cup of tea, that label. But yeah, so like I would have marketing meetings with Mammoth, just like I would, with Interscope for the Primus releases or any other band's label. It started out pretty good because like Charlie Hunter was super legit.
Yeah.
Merv was pretty eclectic, but I think the average person could kind of digest what was going on there.
You're bullshitting right now. Merv,
No.
that first Cosmodrome
I mean,
record is out of this world, weirdo.
Maybe I'm not remembering. I'm sure it's been at least 30 years since I've heard it. But my point is that things started to get a little dicey when it got to Porch and Laundry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as the mythology goes, what's the record that Mammoth refused to put out, or so Les
Beanpole.
said. Beanpole, yeah.
And so that's 100% true that they heard Beanpole and said, we're done?
That's actually what I wanted to ask David about, if Beanpole was ever considered for Prawn Song, or if you ever heard Les discussing
Beanpole was
Beanpole.
considered. I sent Jay the tape, and it's not like they said. Les has kind of forgotten it a little bit. It wasn't that they said we're done. They just said they weren't going to put that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there were
The
no more Prawn
conversation
Song
diluted
releases.
into we're done
I mean-
working together. Yeah.
The idea of one-offs, because now they're spending a lot of money too.
Yeah.
So no money was ever made. But Alphabet Soup obviously is one thing that we've overlooked here.
Right.
And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but the timing was such that in 1992, this incredible jazz-oriented scene started in San Francisco that was happening in a lot of small clubs.
Which came out of Charlie Hunter, right?
Yeah, so Charlie was a big part of that. Alphabet Soup was a part of it.
Yep. Like jazz hip hop.
Yeah, and some of it was very hip hop influenced, and some of it was not. I mean, Charlie was instrumental. Alphabet Soup had two rappers.
Right.
One of whom was Chris Berger, aka CB, who was in a band I'd been managing for a few years already at that point called the Mofessionals with Dave Ellis' sister Zoe. Dave being of Charlie Hunter Trio on sax. So what we wound up with on the night of the Prawn Song Gavin exploitation party was a 4-act bill: Sausage, Merv, Alphabet Soup, and Charlie Hunter. And Jay Lane was the drummer in 3 of those 4 bands.
He was busy.
Awesome. Jay Lane playing with Charlie Hunter at that time in the early 90s, it was straight ridiculous jazz. And Charlie Hunter came on the scene with that crazy playing bass and guitar. I'm saying it wasn't just like, hey, here's my buddies that play music. Like Les really said, dude, these motherfuckers need to be seen because they rip. And when Jay was doing that jazz shit with the Charlie Hunter Trio, which I saw a few times, and you're mind blown at those dudes doing that with Dave Ellison, of course.
Yeah, and I mean,
on sax was amazing.
Dave was later a member of some Grateful Dead related projects with Jay.
Yeah, that's right.
Dave and Jay were best buddies from childhood.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Even though Jay grew up in San Francisco and Dave grew up in Berkeley, as did Charlie, I cannot remember how they originally met, but Jay will gladly give Dave Ellis's father credit for convincing him and maybe even helping him to go to the summer music camp up in Sonoma County called Cazadero.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
wow.
So Dave and Charlie were into Berkeley High, and they had an incredible, very well-known jazz program for high school students, which Joshua Redman came out of.
I know that.
I had an opportunity to speak to Joshua Redman about those days, and he was a year younger than Dave Ellis, and Dave Ellis was his hero in high school. And I actually asked Joshua if he ever went to Cazadero, and he said he went And because he was such a neurotic mama's boy, Jewish kid, half Jewish, half black, like Dave Ellis, that he called his mom to come pick him up after the second day.
Oh, wow.
Dave, come on. My point is that Prawn Song wasn't just bringing in weirdo friends of Les's to be on the label.
Yeah.
Like, it was legit good stuff.
Only
Right,
some of them were weirdos. There was some
Yeah.
legit
I mean,
stuff.
Merv was a weirdo, and Keo got in the band, and shit went great.
South.
No, great.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing. I lived in San Francisco, until like 2004. So in 92, I'm like a single guy who loves jazz and whatever else, and was managing bands and was always looking for new stuff. And I loved that jazz scene. Like, I had moved out there for the world beat scene, and then there was the funk thrash scene that I was very involved in, obviously. And then now there was this jazz scene. I'm like, this is incredible. And Les was already wanting to sign Charlie. So basically, like, I feel like I had my foot in the door of Les's brain on the jazz front. And so I'm the guy that said, we should be all over this jazz scene. And let's start with Alphabet Soup, because
Right.
the one thing they kind of had over Charlie, I mean, not that it was any better necessarily, but in terms of marketing, they had vocalists.
Yeah, it helps.
Two rappers.
Yeah.
TV was great.
Yeah. And the original guy, Zach, was kind of this reggae guy who sang a lot and did these kind of like hooky kind of like reggae melodic vocals while CB rapped. Sometimes they do stuff together. It was just really, really cool. So it was the Up and Down Club, south of Market.
Right.
It was Cafe de Nord on Market Street, kind of towards Castro. And it was the Elbow Room down in the Mission, very close to where my office was. Those were the three main ones. But there were others, and it was every night. I mean, I literally would go out at least 3 nights a week to see that stuff, because there was like weekly thing. Oh, and let's not forget about the Brown Fellinis.
You're right on.
Yeah.
Which was Beatnik's drummer.
Beatnik's drummer, Kevin Carnes.
Yes.
Yeah, who's friends with my sister. He moved away, but yeah, so they were really good too. And everybody had like a weekly gig somewhere. Like, I feel like, I don't know, Alphabet Soup was kind of Up and Down Club, Fellini's was maybe I don't know. But it was a great, great time. Alphabet Soup was on that Gavin party. I can't remember when that record came out. Maybe it was 94 also.
Alphabet Soup record was 95.
Oh,
Wow.
That's crazy.
Trippy.
Laying in the cut.
Lay low in the
Yeah.
cut.
Laying low in the cut.
Laying deep in the cut, I think. Low
Laying
in the cut.
deep in the
One of the
cut,
two.
yeah.
I forget which in the cut, but it was one of them.
Yeah.
Hey,
So I mean,
you sent me out in a van with those guys up the West
Did I?
Coast that one time.
oh my god. Yeah. So I
TV,
wasn't.
and I
mad.
think Blake was the other rapper on that run.
Cool.
And we
Mike
opened
Blake
for the
joined.
Roots, actually,
No way.
in 95 when the Roots were nobodies. And we were playing
Wow.
bars with the Roots.
That is amazing.
Wow.
Sawyer, you were everywhere, man. If we needed somebody to like make sure shit was going to go right,
You knew who to call. You
That's
can
right.
still call me.
You were the man.
But unfortunately, I wasn't managing Alphabet Soup, so there was a little bit of whatever. It was a little bit more chaotic than some of the other projects. But yeah, I mean, so let's see, what was the order? So Charlie came out first, I guess.
So, yeah, Charlie in 93, Merv, Porch and Laundry in 94, Alphabet Soup in 95, Up and Down Club Sessions, as you were, I think, leading towards, was 95, both of those, and Eskimo as well in 95.
Yeah, Eskimo was another one that
right.
like nobody at Mammoth could possibly understand
Yeah.
what
Nice.
any of us saw in them. Whatever I did see in them, I never would have wanted to like risk my own money on. But I was the co-owner of Prawn Song Records, so there wasn't any money I ever could have made on Charlie Hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, Eskimo was very residence-like, so I can see why Les was attracted to them.
Yeah, and we discussed other things. Polka Side was under discussion.
Yes, there's some literature out there from 95 or so, a press release of something that says Polkaside will be releasing a record on Prawn Song. So that didn't come to fruition.
Maybe that was sliding into the beanpole territory, but
Yeah.
The end of things.
So
Yeah.
Beanpole and Polkaside are the only two misses I know of as far as not releasing anything. Were there any others that come to mind?
I don't recall, you know, I mean, because obviously there were these conversations where I'd try to convince Les to do something like Alphabet Soup, and he was really tight with CB. I think CB had dated Les's sister-in-law at one point. You know, it was all one big happy family with the professionals and everything.
That's true. All that you just said is true.
Yeah. So that was an easy conversation, but like, you know, I don't remember if I pushed for Brown Fellini's. You know, I personally wouldn't have pushed for anything else. I had this idea for a minute that, hey, we're a real record company and we can do things other than put out our buddies' records. So
Right.
what if we like reissued some legendary jazz experimental record that's been out of print for 20 years? And the one that I focused on, which coincidentally is something I've been listening to a lot lately, was a guy named James Blood Ulmer, guitar player who has worked with Bill Laswell, certainly, but, you know, he's sort of from this Ornette Coleman, kind of like they have this style of music they created called harmonic music, which is kind of free jazz, basically, but they added funk to it. So it's like totally uncontrolled melodically and super deep grooves behind it, you know?
Yeah. I had a roommate who was really into Ornette Coleman. He was studying trombone and he listened to Ornette a lot and it just took me out. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually gone back to all this stuff recently. The coolest thing so the James Blood Ulmer was called Tales of Captain Black, and it was the coolest package. And I was reading about it recently. It turned out that Ornette had a label for like a year, and that's what label put this record out. And not only was it a gatefold sleeve, but it came with a booklet that explained in detail the musical, melodic and harmonic structure of harmonic music.
Oh wow, wow.
You know, and Mammoth was ready to do it, and I kind of got less into the idea, but there was no business person to call and say, hey, we want to reissue that record. And I did call James Blood Ulmer one time, and I sounded like he was about to die. But that was in like mid 90s, and he's still kicking now. Like I literally saw him. I saw him do a solo show in Philly, like just last year.
So somebody has re-released that record and made money off of it.
There's a label in Japan called DIW, I think. They probably put it out in Japan only, and you can buy the import. So, you know, we made that sampler CD for the Gavin party, which, again, I have to think was January 94, but I mean, it could have been a year later. I don't know. I mean, those dates, the Alphabet Soup not coming out until 95 kind of throws me off, because I feel like it was a January date at Bimbo's, because I got snowed in New York for a few days. And even though we had the jumbo prawn cocktail appetizer at the party. You know, I think I got there after the jumbo prawns had been consumed, because I literally came straight from the airport. They closed the airports in New York for 2 days, and I got like the first flight out and just barely made it. But
you didn't get the prawns.
And by the way, Gavin, the Gavin thing refers to the Gavin Convention, which was an extension of the Gavin Report, which was a San Francisco published weekly radio trade publication. You know, CMJ was the one for college. Commercial radio had numerous trade publications. Some were more genre specific. I forget if Gavin was all genres or not, but it was a fun thing if you could get into the things. Bands would come to town and do little private shows and stuff like that, and there'd be panels. I think I was on the cover of the Gavin Report with Herbie Herbert, who managed Journey, and Elliot Kahn, who was Primus's first lawyer and became one of the co-managers of Green Day. You know, the Gavin thing, I was just trying to think of like different marketing opportunities that we had with these different releases, you know. And with Charlie, I don't specifically remember a lot of what they were. I mean, Trows and I were co-managing Charlie. You know, the punchline to the Charlie story is just that of all of the things that we put out on Prawn Song, Charlie was the only one that actually did what was supposed to happen, which is that you put out your one record on Prawn Song and you graduate to a real record company.
Yeah, that launched his career because he got signed by Blue Note.
And then you pay back Prawn Song and move on.
Yeah, I don't
Wait,
know.
what?
I don't think
Nobody paid back? What
no, nobody
happened?
paid anything back, unfortunately. But yeah, so Trows was more involved with Charlie than I was as a manager. But there were certain things that I had more experience in, like shopping bands to major labels, and it just actually happened to work out that Trows was even, I think, on the road specifically during the time that we wound up shopping Charlie to major labels. And so, everything that happened with Charlie on a management level, when I was the co-manager, the one thing I can sort of point to as mostly my responsibility was him graduating to Blue Note. I mean, just in the sense of negotiating the deal. Obviously, the reason why they wanted to sign him had nothing to do with me, except for the fact that I was Prawn Song. But the point is just that we had every jazz label interested in Charlie, and we had major labels that just happened to have jazz departments interested in signing Charlie to their jazz sub label, like Warner Brothers Jazz. Interscope, I mean, Tom Wally was so open-minded, our A&R guy, who's one of the top guys at that label and later the president of Warner Brothers. He was so supportive of Les and everything that we were doing that he was willing to sign Charlie Hunter.
Oh,
and Charlie
wow.
Hunter was like, why would I sign to Interscope? They've never released a jazz label. I'm like, a jazz record. And I'm like, well, they had never released any records when we signed with them. But yeah, Charlie wanted to go with Blue Note. I mean, the guy that was running Blue Note at the time was a legendary record man, as you would call him back then. This guy named Bruce Lundvall, who had created a label through Elektra called Musician Records, and I think he was at Columbia for that. But just a legendary guy and a total sweetheart of a human being. That was an easy call for Charlie. Not to mention the catalog, that Blue Note had.
So Charlie is able to hit it big with Blue Note, and he released a handful of records with them. He's got a lot of records at this point. I think I lost track about 15 years ago. I got a whole bunch, though. The Merv record was interesting with the comic book tie-in to promote it, and I thought that was really a really clever idea. Do you remember where that came from?
Do you remember who the artist was or anybody involved in putting that together? I know I have copies of it. Do you guys have copies of that?
I have the comic book.
I have no idea.
I have it. I'd have to dig it out.
I mean, I don't remember Merv or Brain or any of the other Limbo Maniacs being specifically like comic book fans. I remember that back in the earliest days when the Limbo Maniacs, were a thing, they lived together. All four of them, Pete, House, all those guys on
Dude, the
23rd.
best parties after the shows were at the Mission House.
Right? I
Puppet show. Come on now.
Yeah, I mean, we would have Super Bowl parties there. The Niners were, the team of the decade in the 80s. And Merv would put his amp facing out of the window and turn it up to, 11 and just fucking go off. And like we were like a quarter of a block from Mission Street. It was like Mission 23rd. And there'd be like parades when the Niners won and stuff like that. But the reason I bring it up is that in the building that their flat was in, on the ground floor, was a comic book store. And this guy, Scott, used to run it, who was this very unusual looking dude who I would see for decades later, like walking through the Mission. Like he almost looked like a subterranean dweller kind of guy, like just doesn't see the light of day too much and has these really thick glasses. And so I don't remember what the store was called, but everybody called it Scott's Comics. So if you see anybody named Scott,
I wouldn't know.
In the credits of that comic book, that's him. But I honestly,
you know what? Sorry to interrupt, but it's on the inside cover or the back cover that they mention Scott's Comics and say, pick this up at Scott's Comics, and there was an ad for them. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not totally making this up then.
Yeah.
Because that was a possibility in my mind. But yeah, I mean, the greatest thing about the Merv marketing obviously was the video, which our great friend Rob Shapiro, not Shapiro, Shapiro.
Right, yeah.
And Les used to call him Shaporno for Shapiro. But he was involved in all the Mark Core directed videos that Primus made, at least most of them, as like the producer of the videos. had this crazy place that he lived in, which was also south of Market Street at the time. It was just like a mess in there. And the video was actually filmed in that apartment or house or whatever it was.
Oh, that's the place. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then of course it got on Beavis and Butthead.
Right. That was huge, I imagine.
Which is, I mean, what more can you do?
Right.
Shave your face, right?
Shave your face.
Dave?
Yeah. Obviously that whole concept now is coming back to me from that record. It was pretty out there.
Yeah. So did that Merv record do anything? I'm sure it got a little bit of buzz thanks to Beavis and Butthead and maybe the comic book.
It did something. I can't possibly tell you what it sold, but I'll tell you this. I mean, Merv had we kept going with Prawn Song, and Merv kept putting out records through Prawn Song, and we kept working with Mammoth. In other words, stability in all possible ways, consistency. I'm sure it would have grown well, because the live shows were just always off the hook. I mean, Kehoe is an incredible performer,
right,
and a great guitar player. I always thought that Merv was one of the greatest guitar players I've ever known. Probably the best guitar player I've ever worked with.
He is, and he is the unsung hero of the Bay Area Rippers, man.
Yeah, and I mean,
it sucks that he did not get the praise of like a Joe Satriani or Lur Lalonde. He was always under the curtain, and nobody ever really understood how killer that guy was.
And when you say the praise of, you're comparing it to those guys. Not that Satriani and Lur didn't praise Merv. It's just he didn't get the same
No, I'm just saying that those guys made it to the next level, and
Right.
Merv always was in the background, although he was twice as good of a guitar player as any of them.
Yeah, Merv could play anything. I mean, I know I've talked a lot about the Limbo Maniacs on this show, but I mean, the problem is like Merv eventually just decided he was never going to tour, and obviously he did Holy Mackerel, and he did
Merv for years, dude.
Yeah, Merv toured quite a bit, and they would open for Primus.
Dirtball in the van, dude.
Yeah.
I think they did an extended run, West Coast run with Primus in, I want to say 99, maybe?
And they were in a van.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were always like the perennial choice for like a hometown show opener and stuff like that. Man, even as late as like 2011 or something, I put him on a Cheap Trick show I did at the Warfield, which was awesome, and Brain was in the band.
I think Robin Zander really loved Kehoe's O Sole Mio, I remember.
Yeah.
How about Porch and Laundry? Because you said it got dodgy with Mammoth with them, but Porch I think got a little bit of traction, and then Soya, didn't you say you were Laundry's tour manager when they went with Tool? Is that right?
Yep.
Nice.
I was everything manager on that.
Wow, so Laundry opened for Tool. I couldn't have even told you that.
It was right when Stink Fist came out as a song.
Okay.
And their record wasn't out. I think they came out on not Undertow. What's the one after it?
I don't know Tool enough.
I don't know Tool enough either, but like the cover of the little tour book flippy page with what hotels and where you were going said Stink Fist with Ren and Stimpy on it.
Oh, wow.
And that was like the new song they had just wrote, because it takes them like 8 years to write one song.
Yeah. You're right.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wasn't managing Porch.
Okay.
And I feel like I was kind of managing Laundry, and I was definitely managing Merv. But
I remember Dave doing stuff for all those bands because I was the utility guy.
Yeah.
So I was hands-on 200% with Primus, and every time I was like, hey, Tim's band's going to go open for Tool for like 2 weeks. Can you go take care of it? And I'm like, what does that mean? To go take care of it, everything. And okay, I didn't know what I was doing, and I somehow figured it out.
Wow.
And got there, and got us back,
The thing that I remember about Porch was that there was I don't remember who the other guys were besides Todd, but I remember there was this one guy who was difficult. And I think he was a bad guy. But
Todd,
Chris Fry on bass.
drummer was Chris Ayers, was in
Dave Ayers on on drums,
Dave
right?
Ayers
Chris
was
Fry on
in-
bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember which of those two guys it was, but
Dave Ayers ended up passing away from heroin.
shut up, dude.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And Chris, the bass player, quit because dude was doing the herons. And then they had another bass player, Bay Area dude. I have to think about it, but we had Porch open for Victim's Family on a West Coast run, and we always would have Porch open for VF shows up until Todd was done doing it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, this just reminds me of kind of one of the sort of takeaways from the whole experience with Prawn Song for me, which is that doesn't matter how good of friends you are with musicians. If you're the record company, you're on the opposite side of the table.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's exceptions, but I was going to say, for the most part, record companies own the master tapes. So did Les and I intend to own the master tapes? Probably. I don't really remember specifically, but I'm sure that's what the contract said, Here we are putting every cent that we ever raised from revenue of selling like any of those records, like any money that came back from Charlie Hunter or Merv, went right back into the next record. We never made a penny off the whole company. So you say to yourself, why would somebody do that? That's a good question.
Well, that's Les's MO, is help my friends out.
Yeah. So my point though is simply that, like, to be in that position and then to have an artist, accuse you of anything negative, like, you stole the rights to my master tapes. It's like, well, that's what record companies do. I mean, I just said, like, we'll be the label and we'll put your record out, and you're like, oh, you own my masters? It's like, okay, well, sorry. I had a similar situation with Alphabet Soup one time, who actually were my friends, CB and Jay Lane. I mean, those are my buddies. Right. Jay from the beginning of my career, and all those guys were super nice. But Kenny Brooks was a little aloof. Dred Scott was the keyboard player. He was very aloof.
Yep.
And then I forget the bass player's name. He was a super nice guy. And then they had this manager, Gary, who was a nice guy too, that I knew from around the way, in the East Bay and stuff. And yeah, I mean, we put a lot into that record, and man, those guys really weren't happy at one point. And maybe it was when the first royalty statement came or something. And they thought, they were expecting to make big money. We put money into Alphabet Soup in a way that we didn't do with anybody else, because it was melodic with vocals. Yeah. We figured out a single, and we got a hip hop DJ to do a remix, which coincidentally, everything comes all the way back around, was a guy named A Plus from the East Bay. And I'm pretty sure he was in Souls of Mischief, which was an East Bay hip hop band.
Yep.
I have a show in Napa in late September with the great band called Black Pumas.
Oh, sure.
And they it's kind of a one-off for them. They're just doing like a festival in LA, and I was able to get a show with them. They just announced that Souls of Mischief are going to open that one show for them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But that remix was super cool. So then we were like, okay, well, now we have this kind of single version of this kind of jazzy, hip hop song. And then now we'll spend money on a video. We made a video for that as well with the same guy, I feel like, that did the Limbo Maniacs Shake It video, who actually passed away himself as well. So there was a lot of money spent. And, as we've discussed, I mean, they're, at least at the time, and probably still to this day, they're industry standards as far as, how does the budget for those expenses get allocated? And at the very least, a video budget would be 50% recoupable out of the band's royalties, if not 100%. I can't remember in this case. And the same with the remix. Even though it's a promotional thing, it's a recording expense. You
got to pay that dude to do it.
Yeah. And so now we're like looking at, and I can't remember from release to release on Mammoth Records if everything was done in-house or if we ever had any independent publicists. Mammoth certainly had, their own marketing divisions, retail marketing, different kinds of radio promotions. Everything we ever put out on Prawn Song clearly got pitched to college radio on a, as wide of a scale as possible. And some of those eclectic, releases that we've already talked about, probably got some college radio airplay here and there. I mean, there were hundreds of stations, and some of them were pretty gone, with the Alphabet Soup remix, did we hire a hip hop radio promotion independent company? Probably. I can't remember. But so there was a lot of money spent to try to make that into something, and obviously didn't do all that much. I think I don't know if it's the A plus remix or the original version, but that track, which is called Take a Ride.
Yeah, I love that song, Alphabet Soup.
Yeah, it's definitely on at least one kind of cool compilation album that we had nothing to do with. That just sort of, sought us out. That I have somewhere. It's called like Groove something. I forget. Possible that it was on a European compilation of some kind as well, but that wasn't necessarily something that we set out to accomplish.
Yeah, but dude, on top of everything that you're saying right now, there wasn't like gold records coming in, so there wasn't an influx of money on the artist's end to help you out. You were constantly feeding out to help these artists.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to break bands, even back in the heyday in the
right
early.
And I'm not dissing. I'm saying you guys did all you could.
Yeah,
you didn't get like a band that sold 1 million records that one year on that one song.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, man, there was a time in the later 90s, when, again, Trows had been there. And then I had an assistant who's gone on to be a hugely successful manager named Jordan Kurland. He manages Death Cab for Cutie.
I saw him recently, actually.
Yeah, almost 20 years now he's managed that band.
Wow.
And he's had dozens of other incredible artists. So my point is that as his career started developing in our office, suddenly now he was a manager too. It was before Death Cab, but me, him, and Trows were managing bands, and we needed more staff. And my point about this is, and so that's when we started to use the name figurehead management.
Right, that was you and Trows.
Yeah, so Trows didn't want to be David Lefkowitz management, which is
gotcha.
understandable. And so we used that name, certainly with Charlie and lots of other things. So now I suddenly had to build up a support staff. There was at least 6 or 7 of us in the office, and every penny that was spent on that staff came from my earnings from Primus.
Oh, dang.
And like, we managed several other bands, most of whom were on major labels. Many of them were signed to major labels before we ever even heard of them. And then the labels would come to us and say, we need a manager. And we still never made any money from any of those bands, pretty much. And I'm sure Charlie eked out some money.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned takeaways. So that experience with Prawn Song, you must have learned a lot, but you probably got some life lessons out of it, or business lessons out of it. So what were some of those enduring takeaways from your time Prawn Song? Because it petered out around 95. It's seemingly right around when Primus was coming back with Tales from the Punch Bowl.
I would say that the main thing I learned from Prawn Song Records is, number one, never start a label.
Yeah. Especially then or now or at any time. What's the
number 2? If you start a label, never put out records by your friends.
Yeah.
Number 3, if you're going to do the numbers 1 and 2, don't make them one-off recording deals. So, I mean, the whole thing was just, not great. And I mean, I had a confrontation with Alphabet Soup this one night, which I was leading to before, which just soured me on the whole thing in such a way, like, and this one, we actually put a lot of money into it. Right. And then they were pissed off that money got spent in ways other than going into their pockets. But the fact is that there wouldn't have been a cent for their pockets if we hadn't spent the money to try to reach for bigger levels. Yeah. And then even that didn't get to enough. I mean, it was very rare in those days, even on major labels. I'm sure I mentioned it before with, Faith No More's, huge hit, on Warner Brothers with Epic and all that stuff. I mean, they were even saying like, you have to sell like 1 million albums before you recoup all of the things. And you can start seeing royalties over, and above that. Obviously, we were on a much smaller scale with Prawn Song. But I think that negativity, like maybe with the Porch Guy and the Alphabet Soup stuff, was getting back to less. So it sort of backfired. Here we are trying to help people, and they hate us for it.
Yeah, especially when it's acquaintances and friends, that gets really awkward.
I mean, luckily, relationships were deep enough with Todd and Jay Lane and CB and Charlie. Charlie, it worked out well for, but that those relationships didn't suffer at all. I'll tell you though, when I was meeting with Bruce Lumbaugh at Blue Note Records, I'm not sure if I've said this on here before, but I guess let me jump back to the Up and Down Club sessions. Up and Down Club Volume 1 had been released locally by the guy that owned the club. And so now here we are with a label. We've put out Charlie and Alphabet Soup. Now he's got a compilation album that's got Charlie and Alphabet Soup.
Right.
And I forget who else was on Volume 1, but it was a great lineup. And then he was thinking about putting out Volume 2, and it was just a local thing. It wasn't being sold really anywhere. I mean, there could have been some French DJ that picked it up or whatever.
Yeah.
But so I was, involved enough in the scene and excited enough about the scene that I basically pitched him on, well, why don't we put out Volume 2 on Prawn Song, and then we'll reissue Volume 1 on a national basis, which you never had distribution. And because they'll both be out at the same time, we can kind of market them, together. So he went for that. But my point is that when I was meeting with Bruce Lumbaugh from Blue Note Records, maybe we had already signed Charlie, to the label. He looked at me as if I was the owner of like a local jazz label in San Francisco. And he's like this jazz legend. And that was definitely one of the best things that happened to me as a result of Prawn Song Records. You know what I mean?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Because I had corralled this jazz part of our, catalog. I was able to convince Les to do those things. Obviously,
Right.
Charlie was his idea from the beginning. But I sort of, built on that with the, very active local music scene. So that was just kind of cool. I don't know.
Pretty cool when a heavy like that though either treats you as an equal or is just talking to you like you know what you're doing, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you could just do what you do, and it'll sort of add up to something that people look at as this amazing thing. It just depends on the perspective. And other times people will be way more successful and look at it like, oh well, at least you tried.
Yeah. So what was the major outcome? I suggested that it petered out around 95. Of course, Prawn Song persisted. So what was kind of the fate of Prawn Song Records after this run of releasing other people's music? Because I think Primus was releasing but the Primus records after this all had the Prawn Song label on them. I believe the Frog Brigade, I think, was the resurrection of Prawn Song, of actually releasing newer material.
I don't recall the exact step-by-step history of the beginning of that hiatus, if you will. I know that this negativity from a couple of the artists was a big part of it. I know that Les wanted to release Beanpole and Mammoth didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe in Les's mind, he was like, well, let's forget the whole thing because our partner company won't release this project he was excited about. Mammoth went through some major changes. It was probably later and probably had nothing to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, Jay sold that company to Disney. I can't for the life of me imagine why Disney wanted to own Mammoth Records. Yeah. I totally forgot about this. So as we may have discussed, I managed the Melvins from 93 to 98.
Oh, okay. I may not have been aware of that. All right.
Oh, okay. So this ties in with Mammoth and sort of Jay Ferris's career development, which is that Melvin's obviously being part of the Seattle scene to whatever extent. They'd been on some early compilations. I mean, Kurt Cobain was their friend before Kurt had a band. Buzz from the Melvins maintains that they really taught Kurt about punk rock, like that Buzz would make him little cassette compilations of punk rock in high school. So anyway, obviously by 93, I mean, Nirvana had changed the world, and everybody was getting signed, and alternative had become the mainstream and whatnot. The whole culture had changed too, not just the industry. But so every band was getting signed, and the Melvins had moved to San Francisco. They were signed to Atlantic Records, which at the time was being run by a guy named Danny Goldberg, who had been one of Nirvana's co-managers, sort of, or at least co-owned the company that managed Nirvana. So he signed the Melvins, and Kurt was going to be producing at least part of the Atlantic Records debut album. Atlantic said, you have to get a manager or we're not going to put the record out. And so whatever, I stepped up and did it. And it was challenging from the beginning, starting out with some personal stuff with the band, which was sort of quickly brought under control, some shuffling of the lineup. You know, the bass player originally was Buzz's girlfriend, who was Lori Black, and she definitely had her own issues. She was the daughter of Shirley Temple.
Whoa, no way.
Yeah, Shirley Temple
Wow.
Black.
Outstanding.
Former ambassador to the world. Like literally, she became Shirley Temple became an ambassador, United States ambassador, and they lived in like Palo Alto or somewhere. Anyway, so she was out of the band early, and they made some great records, some great covers, and some great producers, and it was all very cool. But after 2 records on Atlantic, sort of one of those things like, maybe it sold like 40 or 50,000 per release. They toured like crazy. And they even opened up for a bunch of Nirvana stuff. I mean, they were on the European Nirvana tour when Kurt OD'd. For a few days,
Italy.
The band was just sitting around like, are we going to keep going on tour? Because we're spending money to cover our hotels and crew salaries, and we're not making anything because there's no more shows. And then quickly the whole tour got canceled, and he came home and, passed away shortly thereafter. But at whatever point after the Melvins had done 2 records on Atlantic, there was sort of that conversation like, the label saying, well, we're not really sure we want to keep going because it doesn't seem like we're really getting anywhere, So it was at that time that Mammoth actually did a deal with Atlantic. I think the idea was that Mammoth had an artist or two that was having major commercial success, and now they needed major label marketing and distribution, which had nothing to do with Prawn Song. Just acts that Mammoth had signed. Jay partners with Atlantic and gets to be an A&R guy at Atlantic Records in their New York office and moves to New York. So now here I am with the Melvins 2 albums in, and they aren't getting enough support from the label. Granted, they're not having success on the label. So anyway, we worked it out to where the third Melvins release, I guess was sort of going to be like a joint Mammoth Atlantic release. And Jay was now involved in that. That didn't do a whole heck of a lot better. We went back to independent labels with the Melvins. But I will say that Jay's assistant, probably before he got to Atlantic, but certainly when he was there, was the great John Moore, co-owner and co-founder of Bowery Presents, the biggest independent concert promoter in the Northeast that was eventually purchased by AEG and is now the New York and I think Boston offices of AEG. Guy was the assistant.
Wow.
And now he's like one of the most successful concert promoters in America.
AEG's huge, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Bowery has, so many incredible venues in New York and in Boston, and actually...
It's funny to hear you tell these stories because the people, it does seem like a small world. Mm-hmm. And so you get to know a lot of people through these endeavors, whether they succeed or not. But then you have that contact, and so you're able to foster a relationship, I suppose, make those connections and use them to your advantage if need to be.
No, I think that's a great insight, actually, Josh. And and I mean, for me, I'm like a cockroach. You can't kill me. At least they haven't figured out a way to yet.
Yeah.
It's like I keep coming back, and it's like, and everything I've done, when I started out as a concert promoter in 2007, I knew a lot of agents. I didn't know the majority of agents. I certainly do now. But all these relationships that we're talking about and all the other ones that we haven't talked about, I mean, almost every single one has come back around in some other way. Like tomorrow, I have a conference call set up with a guy who's been an artist manager for 20 years, and we're going to talk about me maybe booking this new priority artist client of his from the UK. And I never knew him that well, but he was one of those like 120 major label A&R guys that I sent every demo tape to for years.
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever listened to one of them.
But he knows your name, right?
But yeah, so he remembers me. Just in that world alone, there was like 120 people that did like, A&R that covered rock and related music. And I just sent everything I ever did to them. And then you work with a band on a label and, everybody that works there. I just recently reconnected with the woman who did all the international coordination for Interscope, whose name was Ann Brubaker originally. And she lives in New York and has been out of the music business for 20 years and is very happy, to be out.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's just random because she's not even in the business anymore. But it's like, we start talking. It's like, yeah, we used to be in touch like on almost a daily basis. When there's like a record out that you're working, I mean, you're talking to everybody. So you just kind of get thrown to the fire. And even if you don't know what the heck you're doing half the time, you're just kind of all in it together,
Yeah. I think that's a good place to pause. I did want to talk about sausage, but maybe we can save that for next time because the Prawn Song Records thing is personally for me it's fascinating because it's just this little piece of the bigger picture, but there are so many, once again, familiar names that have come and gone over the years, like Merv and Brain and you name it, that are so integral, I suppose, to the overarching story. When these names come around and I recognize them, I, as a fan, I feel a little rewarded for having read the liner notes and going, oh yeah, that's the guy that was in this other thing. And David Lefkowitz management, sure. Okay, so Dave was doing this one too. It's really, for me, it sounds nerdy, but it's fun to connect the dots.
I can relate to that for sure, man. I mean, that's when I got into the business, I was able to start calling producers and, some managers and label people from shit I read on liner notes,
Yeah.
It's I've certainly tried to put that nerddom to use in my career.
I tell you what, when I need someone to help me out, I call Tim Soya because he knows everybody. Thanks so much for your time, Dave. I appreciate it, and thanks for taking us back.
Thanks for reaching out to me, man. I'm glad we could work it out so quickly.
Yeah,
good to see you guys, or at least part of you, Frankie.